So today we're going to dive into something pretty cool, a new blueprint for making digital people. It's called the Momentum Human Rig, or MHR for short. And it's designed to fix a problem that I bet you've noticed, even if you couldn't quite name it. You know that feeling, right? You're playing a game, maybe you're in VR, and the character on screen looks almost real, but then they move, and something's just off. It's kind of creepy, actually. Well, that feeling has a name. It's the uncanny valley, and it is one of the toughest nuts to crack in computer graphics. But today, we're looking at a new model that's taking a serious swing at finally getting it right. Okay, so to really get why MHR is such a game changer, we kind of need to rewind a bit. Let's take a quick look at the whole quest to create digital humans that actually feel real. It's been a long road, with some amazing breakthroughs, but also a few really stubborn problems that just wouldn't go away. Right, so the story, at least the modern chapter, really kicks off around 2015 with a model called SMPL. This was huge. It gave us a solid, data-backed way to model the human body. Then a few years later, we got SMPL-X, which leveled things up by adding way more detail to hands and faces. And then came Atlas, which had this totally revolutionary idea of, get this, separating the skeleton from the skin. And that's exactly where MHR picks up the story. So, what was this big, stubborn problem I mentioned? Well, honestly, it was a tangled mess. Just imagine you have a puppet and you want to move its arm, but every time you move the wooden bone inside, the puppet's shirt just stretches all weird and wrong. That's exactly what animators were dealing with. The character's skeleton and their skin were all tangled up together. It was a total nightmare to control. And that, right there, is where MHR steps in as the hero of our story. It's a new system that takes all the best ideas from those older models, especially that decoupling idea from Atlas, and polishes them into the super powerful, but also really artist-friendly tool that's built for what's next in AR, VR, and animation. So this is the big aha moment. It's all about that decoupling. Let's stick with that puppet analogy. The old way, it's like the puppet's skeleton was literally glued to its skin. If you moved a bone, you'd mess up the surface every single time. But the MHR way, it separates them. It's like you have a perfect, clean wooden skeleton, and then you sculpt the clay body on top of it. You can get the skeleton just right, and it won't interfere with the skin at all. It's a total game changer. Okay, so how does MHR actually handle all this movement? Well, it all starts with this super detailed skeleton. We're talking 127 joints. But here's the really clever part. An animator doesn't have to fiddle with all 127 of those. No way. Instead, they just use 204 smart, high-level controls. It's like being a master puppeteer who only needs to pull a few main strings to get this beautiful, complex motion from the whole puppet. It's maximum detail, but with minimum hassle. All right, next up, let's talk about those ugly joint bends. You've definitely seen this in games, right? When a character bends their elbow and it looks all pointy and twisted, kind of like a candy wrapper? Yuck. Well, MHR fixes this with something called pose correctives. The best way to think about these is like tiny, smart springs hiding just under the skin. When a joint bends, these springs automatically make sure the skin deforms naturally, so it doesn't collapse or twist. And what's really cool is how it applies these fixes. See, older models, they used what's called a dense approach. That means fixing the elbow might accidentally cause a weird little twitch in the shoulder. It's like everything was connected. But MHR's approach is sparse. This means our little smart springs only fire off right around the joint that's actually moving. The rest of the body stays perfectly still and predictable. It's precise, localized control. So that's movement, but what about making unique characters? Well, this is another smart move. MHR splits a character's identity into 3 separate pieces: the body, the head, and the hands. And here's why that's so important. Each of those parts is built from its own special, high-quality data set. Think about it. You can get way more detail from a super close-up scan of a hand than you can from one big scan of a whole person. It's all about using the best, most detailed data for every single part. And man, this gives artists so much power. Imagine the most insane video game character creator you've ever used. You've got all these sliders just for the body, a whole other set just for the head, and even more for just the hands. And because they're all separate, you can spend hours sculpting the perfect, hyper-realistic face, and you won't accidentally make the character's arms longer. It's a massive win for artists. Of course, the face is where all the emotion happens, right? And MHR is really clever here. Instead of relying on a complicated system that might accidentally mix up a smile with a head tilt, MHR gives artists 72 distinct hand-sculpted expressions. And these aren't random. They're based on this scientific system for coding facial actions. It's basically like handing an animator a perfect toolkit of pure emotions that they can mix and match with total precision. So let's put it all together. What does an artist's workflow actually look like with MHR? Well, it becomes this super clean, logical process. First, you define the skeleton, get those bones just right. Second, you sculpt the body, head, and hands on top, totally separately. Third, you animate the pose, knowing the joints won't look all weird. And finally, you can export that character at any quality you need, from a super high-def movie model all the way down to a lightweight version for your phone's AR. Okay, so we've been through the how, but now for the really important part, the so what. Why does any of this tech stuff actually matter? How does it change the stuff you and I see and interact with every day? Well, first off, the proof is in the numbers. When you take these models and try to fit them to actual 3D scans of real people, HMR just does a better job. It has a smaller error, measured in millimeters, than the models that came before it. Now, you might look at those numbers and think, that's tiny. But trust me, in the world of computer graphics, a fraction of a millimeter is the difference between almost and, wow, that looks real. And hey, this isn't just about numbers on a chart. What this actually means is that you get a much more natural-looking character, especially in those really tricky spots we've been talking about. The shoulders, the elbows, the knees. It's the difference between a character that moves like a clunky robot and one that feels, alive. So what does this unlock for the future? Well, think about it. We're talking about AR and VR avatars that actually look and move like you. Next-gen video game characters that are unbelievably realistic. Digital assistants that can show real emotion. Even things like virtual clothing try-on that actually works because the digital body is accurate. This is really the foundation for a whole new way we're going to interact with the digital world. Now, MHR is a massive step forward, for sure. But the journey to create the perfect digital human, that's definitely not over. The folks behind this are already looking ahead to what's next. Yeah, the research paper is super open about this. They know there's more to do. They're talking about adding things like actual eyeball models, a full mouth with teeth and a tongue. The really fine details. They also want to make the whole system smart enough to adapt to different body shapes automatically. And get this, they're even thinking about how to use the same tech to create awesome, stylized characters, not just realistic ones. And that really brings us back to the beginning. At the end of the day, all this work, all this incredible tech, it isn't just about making prettier graphics or pushing more pixels on a screen. It's about finally crossing that uncanny valley. It's about creating digital reflections of us that don't just look human, but can move, express, and connect in a way that feels, well, truly and deeply human.